Dexter Morgan is a paradox. He is a serial killer, but he is also a hero. A man who wraps his victims in plastic and ends his lives. But we encourage him. Because? How can someone so dark become someone with whom we empathize? How can we make us love him? From the first episode, Dexter's charm is undeniable. His ingenuity, his dedication as a father and brother, and his seemingly genuine interactions with others make us believe that it is more than their darkness. It channels their impulses to something that feels like justice, attacking criminals who slide through cracks. But ask yourself this: would you forgive a murderer in real life if they only kill bad people? Dexter walks a moral tightrope, and somehow, we are there. What is more scary than a wolf with sheep clothes? A wolf who does not know is dangerous. Dexter's charm is not just about his actions, it is his vulnerability. Under the darkness, we see glimpses of a man who yearns for the connection, who wants love. He is not a monster devoid of emotion. He is a man who tries to understand it. And it is not a trip that we all recognize. Take your relationship with Rita, for example. The uncomfortable but endearing attempts of Dexter to maintain a normal facade exhibit a man who desperately tries to mix. He carries him bowling, cooks his breakfast, and appears in his children's school events. On the surface, it looks like the perfect partner. But under that lovely exterior is a man who fights his darkness. Rita herself often comments on how safe Dexter makes her feel, which is ironic, taking into account her secret life. Isn't this a reflection of how we often see what we want to see in others? And then there is your link with Lumen. Unlike Rita, Lumen knows Dexter's secret, but does not go back with horror. Instead, she sees her darkness as a mirror of her trauma. Its connection goes beyond romance. It is an association rooted in shared pain and a need for justice. This relationship highlights Dexter's ability to love deeply, but also underlines how his darkness shapes his ability to connect with others. What does it say about Dexter, or about us, that we root for him in these moments? Think of Dexter's uncomfortable attempts to be a boyfriend for Rita, or a Harrison father. There is an almost childish quality in Dexter's fight to fit into a world that does not understand. We have all felt like this at some point, right? Trying to navigate relationships, yearning to belong while feeling like a stranger. However, Dexter's vulnerability goes beyond his discomfort, is in the way he questions his value. Does he deserve love? Can anyone like him be loved? His relationship with Harrison is perhaps the most moving example of this fight. Dexter wants to be a good father, but the fear that his darkness constantly consumes him, that his darkness consumes his son. The scene in which Dexter has a blood-stained Harrison after Rita's death is a heartbreaking moment that captures her internal conflict. At that time, he is not just a father, he is a terrified man that his actions have condemned his son. We have not all in some way fear that our defects could hurt the people we love? His conversations with Rita often leave this naked. He masks his darkness, presenting a facade of normalcy. But there's an undercurrent of desperation. He wants to be seen, not as a monster, but as someone capable of being good. And that is what makes your fight so identifiable. Not everyone at some point has tried to present the best version of themselves to the world, hiding the parts we fear that others do not accept. Consider the way Dexter interacts with your coworkers in Miami Metro. It is affable, helpful, and even humorous, often spreading tense situations with a well-intentioned joke. These moments show how Dexter, the expert, plays the role of the harmless forensic expert. However, every time he enters his laboratory and examines blood splashing, we remember the chilling reality under the surface. It is a duality that reflects our own lives in smaller ways. How we present a version of ourselves to the world, hiding the struggles we fear would make us unlovable. But here is the deepest question. Is Dexter really different from the people he kills? His victims often wear their masks, hiding monstrous actions behind the respectability plates. By exposing them and eliminating them, Dexter not only serves justice, he is validating his existence. If they deserve to die, then his darkness serves a purpose. But do you do it? Or is it just another murderer who rationalizes his actions through a personal code? Now let's do this personal. How often do we mask our defects or suppress our impulses to conform to society's expectations? How many of our actions are promoted by a desire to be accepted or loved? Dexter's story forces us to face these uncomfortable questions. Imagine you were in his shoes. Would you do anything differently? If you had a dark passenger, would you try to suppress it? Or would you, like Dexter, find a way to live with it? And here's another thought. If someone who loved revealed a secret as dark as Dexter's, how far would you get to protect them? Would it rationalize your actions as Dexter does, convincing you that your darkness serves a greater good? Or would you leave? Dexter challenges us not only to judge it, but to evaluate our capacity for empathy and forgiveness. But this is where it becomes even more complex. Dexter's love is not ordinary. It is powerful, but it is also contaminated by guilt, by the secret. His devotion to Harrison, Debra, and even his respect deformed by the Harry Code shows us a side of him that is deeply human. His love is real, but it is fragile, prepared by lies and the constant threat of exposure. Consider his relationship with Debra. She is more than just her sister. She is her moral compass, her anchor. However, your link is full of complexity. He lies, deceives her, and finally betrays her trust. But he does it for love, or so tells himself. When Dexter's secret is discovered, the consequences are catastrophic. She's forced to reconcile the brother she loves with the killer she now knows him to be. And Dexter? He stays with the knowledge that his actions have destroyed the only person who has always been his constant. This dynamic exposes a disturbing question. Can love survive when it is based on deception? This duality is what makes Dexter so fascinating. His relationships are his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. His love bases him, giving him a reason to fight for normality, but also exposes it. The closer to someone, the more he risks discovering his secret. And when your carefully built world begins to break, the results are devastating. Take your relationship with Rita. At first, it seems perfect. It offers Dexter a feeling of stability, a way of mixing with society. But as Dexter approaches her, the pressure of maintaining her double life rides. His lies multiply, and his ability to maintain his separate world begins to hesitate. When Rita finally becomes a victim, not Dexter's actions, but of the darkness that attracts her life, it is a devastating reminder of the cost of connection. Debra's discovery of Dexter's secret pushes this dynamic even further. Unlike Rita, Debra knows Dexter on a deeper level. She has seen her best and worst moments and has always supported him. But when she learns the truth, their bond is tested in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Her love for Dexter forces her to make impossible decisions, choice that blurs the line between loyalty and complicity. And for Dexter, his knowledge of his secret becomes a line of life and a burden. He wants her to understand, but at what cost for her morality? Ultimately, Dexter's relationships reveal the dual nature of love. It can heal, but it can also destroy. Their connections with Debra, Harrison, and Rita highlight each different facet of this truth. Love gives Dexter a reason to fight for something better, but also exposes the cracks in their carefully constructed life. And for us as spectators, it forces us to face the awkward reality that love, when intertwined with secret and dark, can be as a curse as a gift. Would we act differently in your shoes? If our love made us vulnerable, would we still hug him? Or we, like Dexter, would try to balance the tightrope of connection and self-preservation? These are the questions with which Dexter forces us to fight, and they are what makes his story so convincing. Dexter's love for his son is perhaps the most humanizing aspect of his character, but it is also the most tragic. While he strives to protect his son from the darkness of the world, the disturbing question remains: is Harrison in danger, or himself? Take the moment when Dexter teaches Harrison about Harry's code. On the surface, it is a paternal guide, a way to help Harrison survive. But under him is a chilling truth. By involving his son, Dexter not only protects him, he is attracting him to the darkness he has tried to escape. Dexter's actions often have devastating domain effects. His decision to kill Trinity, for example, leads to Rita's death, leaving Harrison's mother without scars and forever. This raises a painful question. Can love, no matter how well-intentional, justify the damage it causes? This tension creates a powerful dynamic. On the one hand, we are supporting Dexter to succeed as a father. We want Harrison to provide a stable and loving childhood that Dexter himself never had. On the other hand, we are terrified of what could happen if Dexter's darkness bleeds in Harrison's life. Each interaction between them feels like a tightrope walk, a delicate balance between love and danger. Let's take, for example, the scene in which Dexter decides to leave Harrison with Hannah. On a level, he feels like an act of disinterest and acknowledges that his presence endangers his son. But at another level, it is a moment of deep failure. When leaving Harrison, Dexter not only protects him, he is abandoning it. This act forces viewers to face their feelings about fatherhood. Is it better to stay and risk damaging your child, or leaving and risking them vulnerable in a different way? Dexter's struggle as a father reflects a universal truth. The raising of children is an act of constant balance. We all want to protect the people we love, but in doing so, we run the risk of exceeding, controlling, or even hurting them. Dexter's story amplifies this struggle, forcing us to ask, how much of our parenting decisions are they really for the benefit of our children, and how much our fears and guilt drive? Dexter's ability for love forces us to face uncomfortable questions about morality. Can love redeem someone who has done indescribable things? or will they simply mask their darkness? His love for Harrison feels pure, but is entangled in the same network of secrets and violence that defines the rest of his life. Take the hypothetical. If someone you loved revealed a dark secret, like Dexter's, how far would you come to protect them? Excuse me, your actions, rationalizing that their intentions were good? Or would you leave, knowing that staying could make you complicit? Dexter forces us to think about these moral dilemmas in deeply personal terms. At what extent does empathy become enabling? The story of Dexter blurs this line, particularly in its relations with Harrison and Debra. Both characters know parts of Dexter's truth, but his love for him counts his judgment. For Harrison, this is manifested as a growing understanding of his father's darkness, leaving the spectators to ask, is Harrison destroyed to repeat his father's mistakes because he loves him and admires him? Or can love provide an exit to this cycle? Dexter's story suggests that love, although powerful, is not always enough to overcome darkness. But it also shows us that love can be a guiding force, a reason to fight for something better. Dexter's love for Harrison is what keeps him tied to his humanity, even when his dark passenger threatens to consume him. In the end, Dexter's trip as a father is one of the paradoxes. His love is both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness, his salvation and his curse. And for us as spectators, it is a mirror that forces us to ask, how far would we go to protect the people we love? And what cost? But let's take this one step further. What happens if love is not just a redeeming force for Dexter? What happens if it is your greatest weakness? Love not only makes it human, it makes it vulnerable. What clouds his judgment, forces him to take risks, and blinds him to danger? It is through love that people like Lila and Hannah gain power over it, exploiting their need to connect to chaos. However, paradoxically, it is also love that keeps him tied to his humanity. Without it, it could be completely lost to the dark passenger. Take Lila, for example. His ability to manipulate Dexter comes from his desperate desire to be understood. She exploits her loneliness, intertwining in her life, presenting her darkness as something compatible with her own. In it, Dexter briefly sees the possibility of someone who can accept everything, light and dark. But Lila's love is not genuine. It is possessive, destructive. His obsession with Dexter finally threatens to unravel the same stability that he has worked so hard to maintain. By loving Lila, Dexter disappoints his guard, and in doing so, he almost loses everything. Hannah, on the other hand, is a more complex reflection of this dynamic. Unlike Lila, Hannah not only exploits Dexter's vulnerability, she shares it. Its relationship is based on mutual understanding, about the recognition of its shared darkness. But this also has its dangers. Dexter's love for Hannah blurred the limits of his code, forcing him to question his limits. If you can love someone who is killed, don't you make it a hypocritical? And if she can accept her darkness, does that mean that he can also accept it? Dexter's relationships reflect the duality of the human connection. Love can heal, but it can also destroy. You can get the best out of us, but you can also expose our defects. For Dexter, love is a sanctuary and a battlefield. His link with Debra, for example, highlights this tension. She is her anchor, the person who knows him better and loves him more. However, when she discovers her secret, that love becomes an unbearable source of conflict. Debra's fight to reconcile the brother who loves with the murderer, who knew that he forces her, and the public, to face the limits of unconditional love. How much darkness can love endure before it collapses under its weight? Then there is Harrison. Dexter's love for his son reveals another facet of this duality. As much as he wants to protect Harrison, his presence threatens to expose him to the same darkness that defines Dexter's life. Love leads Dexter to protect his son from the world, but also blinds him to how his actions extend through Harrison's life. Is this love, or is it selfishness disguised as protection? Dexter's story forces us to fight with these uncomfortable questions, forcing us to examine cracks in our definitions of love and morality. In the end, Dexter's love is not pure. It is complicated, messy, and often destructive. But that is precisely what makes it so convincing. It is not the love of a hero who sacrifices everything for the greater good. It is the love of a man trapped between two worlds, struggling to reconcile his need to connect with the weight of his secrets. This love forces us to face our ideas about morality. How far would we get to the people who care about? Sorry for your darkness, we would rationalize your actions or draw a line that even love cannot cross. At what point does love become toxic? Dexter's psyche is a maze, where love and fear coexist in a delicate balance. His love leads him to protect, but also blinds him to the consequences of his actions. It forces him to connect, but also creates vulnerabilities that his enemies exploit. And perhaps the most tragically, forces him to see the man who would like to be, a man without rising for the dark passenger, but never allows him to become that man. And maybe that's what leads us to Dexter. We see our struggles reflected in yours. Its history forces us to face the parts of ourselves that we often suppress, the moral commitments we make, the lies that tell us to justify our actions, the fear that our defects will overcome our virtues. Would we be different in your shoes? Would our love redeem us or destroy us? Dexter's trip is not just about his darkness. This is the light to which he clings desperately, the love that keeps him human even when he threatens to consume it. It is a reminder that love, despite all its beauty and power, is never simple. It is messy, it is defective, and sometimes it is dangerous. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we can't look the other way. Dexter is not just a man, it's a mirror. Why do we love him? Because it reflects the parts of ourselves we are afraid to admit. The anger we feel in injustice, the impulses we suppress. Dexter gives those feelings a voice, a path, and somehow we find it satisfactory. It lets us explore the parts of ourselves that we buried under social expectations and moral codes. But what does it say about us that we support it? Is it simply its charm, or is it more deep? A reflection of our struggles with morality, control, and justice. Consider the satisfaction we feel when Dexter eliminates a criminal who has escaped justice. It is not just their actions. These are the emotions that it channels. Anger, frustration, even impotence. Dexter acts on the feelings we all experience, but we are conditioned to suppress. This does more than a character. It becomes a vehicle so that we face our own suppressed impulses. But let's take a closer look. Why is it satisfactory? Is it because we see Dexter as a guard, someone who serves justice when the system fails? Or is it because it is fulfilling a fantasy that most of us would never admit to having? The fantasy of final control, not only about others but about our own darker instincts. Dexter's actions shape the emotions that we often bury, providing a feeling of liberation that we never dared to continue in real life. Think about it. How many times have you felt helpless in the face of injustice? Whether it's a free criminal walk or experiencing personal betrayal, we have all had moments in which we would like to be able to take the matter in our own hands. Dexter not only wants it, he acts. It becomes the judge, jury, and executioner. It is a type of disturbing power, but it is also intoxicating. And as spectators, it attracts us, even if we don't want to admit it. This control fantasy is what distinguishes Dexter. Unlike real-world chaos, where justice is often defective or incomplete, Dexter creates a world where errors harden, even if the methods are horrible, appeals to a primary desire of order, justice. But here is the trap. Its a sense of justice is not universal. He is deeply personal, guided by his moral code, and that is where fantasy begins to crumble. What happens when the personal trial of vendettas in the cloud? How far can someone like Dexter come before your search for justice becomes pure self-control? Every time Dexter points to a predator or a murderer, we feel a fleeting sense of justice. Take the case of Arthur Mitchell, Trinity's murderer. The search for Dexter towards him is not just about protecting society, it is personal. Arthur represents the darkness Dexter fears in himself, a man who has embraced his impulses without restrictions. By killing Arthur, Dexter is not only delivering justice, it is making sure that it is different, that it is better. But is he? Or is it the only difference between Dexter and its victims, the fine sheet of the code that follows? This fragility extends to the perception of the court of justice. How many of us rationalize Dexter's actions because he points to bad people? And what does that say about us? Dexter forces us to face uncomfortable questions about morality. If the system fails, does that give someone the right to take the matter in their own hands? And if so, where do we draw the line? Take your dark passenger. It is not just a label for its compulsions, it is a metaphor of the human condition. It is a reminder of how we all fight with our darkest impulses. How many times have you felt overwhelmed under low heat under the surface, just to suppress it, because society demands composure? Dexter does not suppress it, channel it. And although your methods are extreme, is there a part of us to send your freedom to act on those impulses? The dark passenger represents more than Dexter's impulse to kill. It is a symbol of the internal struggles that we all face. Jealousy, anger, fear, these emotions live within us, influencing our actions in subtle and not so subtle ways. Most of us keep them under control, but Dexter's story asks, what would happen if you couldn't? What would happen if those impulses had a voice, a power over your life? Would it resist, or, like Dexter, would you find a way to coexist with them? And here is irony. Dexter is not free. His dark passenger is not just a load, defines it. Each choice that makes every relationship it builds is formed by its presence. Even when he strives for normality, as in his life with Rita, the tension of his secret threatens to unravel everything. The more tries to connect, the greater the risk of collapse. This paradox is essential for the existence of Dexter. The dark passenger gives him a purpose in a chaotic world, but also imprisons him, preventing him from really living. And isn't that something we all fight with? The loads we carry, whether unfortunate, fears, or hidden defects, have a way to shape our lives more than we would like to admit. Dexter forces us to ask how much of our lives are driven by what we suppress. And if we could throw those parts of ourselves, would we recognize who we have become? Dexter's brilliance lies in this duality. He is both a monster and a mirror, which reflects anger, frustration, and the desire for control that we often bury. When supporting it, we are forced to face disturbing truths about ourselves. How far we would get to the mistakes we have faced. Could we resist the attraction of our darkness? And if we couldn't, would we be able to live with who we became? In Dexter's fight, we see our reflection, a constant battle between who we are and who we want to be. And maybe that's why we can't look the other way. And your victims? They are not only criminals, but they are reflections of what Dexter fears most, losing control. By eliminating them, it not only serves justice, it is creating a feeling of separation between him and the monsters that case. But is that separation real? Or is it just a story that Dexter says that justifies his actions? Take Arthur Mitchell, the murderer of the Trinity. Arthur's ability to live a double life, a loving family man, a murderer without regrets at night, mirrors Dexter's existence. But where Dexter clings to the Harry Code as a way to rationalize his actions, Arthur embraces his darkness completely. Killing Arthur is not just about stopping a predator, it is about demonstrating for yourself that it is different. But is he? Or is it the only difference between Dexter and Arthur? The rules that Dexter chooses to follow? And what about the moments when Dexter hesitates? When his emotions will cloud his judgment? There are times when their murders feel less like justice and more like revenge. His victims force us to face a chilling question. Is there such a thing as a fair murderer? Or is Dexter just another predator, hidden behind the thin sheet of morality that provides its code? Consider the Harry Code. On the surface, it is a moral framework designed to protect Dexter and society, channel their impulses, giving them purpose and direction. But in essence, isn't it just a way for Dexter to justify his actions? The code does not eliminate its darkness, organizes it. It allows you as much as it contains. This raises a disturbing question. How much of our morality is truly manly, and how much is molded by convenience? Like Dexter, we create rules and justifications to make sense of our actions. We rationalize our decisions, telling us that they are for the greater good. But how often is it really about satisfying our own need? Dexter's agency in the Harry Code forces us to face how we sail through our moral frameworks. Are they based on genuine values, or are they just constructions that make us feel that we are in control? Now imagine you had the power of Dexter, the ability to decide who lives and who dies. Would you trust yourself with that responsibility? Or would the temptation of interpreting God be too great? Dexter's story forces us to deal with these questions, not only about him, but of ourselves. How much of our morality is linked to fear of consequences? If there were no repercussions, nobody looking, how far would we get? Dexter operates in the shadows, without rising for the limitations of the law, but is still bound by its own rules. However, even with the code, there are times when it deviates dangerously close to crossing the line. These moments highlight the seductive nature of power. Once you can control life and death, how do you stop? And what is more important, how does it justify stopping one step under which he claims to despise? Dexter is not just a character who sails for his own morality. It is a reflection of the moral commitments that we all do. His dark passenger can be exclusive to his world, but the questions he raises are universal. How much of our behavior is formed by the rules that we impose on ourselves? How often do we justify our actions by stating that they are for the greater good, when in reality, they are driven by personal desires? Dexter's trip forces us to ask these awkward questions. If no one was looking, if there were no consequences, what would we do? And if they gave us the power to impose justice as we consider convenient, could we resist the temptation to take it too far? Or, like Dexter, would we find ourselves trapped in the same darkness that we seek to control? In the end, Dexter is not just a story about a murderer. It is a story about the human condition, on the thin line between control and chaos, justice and revenge. It is a reminder that no matter how carefully we build our lives, the parts of ourselves that we suppress have a way to drag ourselves to the surface. And maybe that's why we cannot look the other way, because in Dexter's struggle, we see ours. Dexter's appeal is in his duality. He is both the hero and the villain of his history, embodying the conflict between good and evil that exists within all of us. Save lives by taking others, serve justice by breaking the laws, and seek love while hiding their true being. It is this complexity that captivates us. Dexter is not just a man who explores his darkness. He is a mirror, forcing us to face ours. Why do we support Dexter, knowing what he is capable of? Perhaps it is because we recognize a part of ourselves in it. He channels his darkness into something that convinces himself that is good, something productive. Not everyone, in some way. We strive to make sense of our defects by finding ways to justify them. Dexter's duality forces us to question where the line is between good intentions and selfish desires. Consider your love for your sister, Debra. On the surface, it is a link based on loyalty and protection, but under him is the truth. Dexter resides at every step, justifying her deceptions, telling himself it's for her good. Its duality is not just about morality, but it is about the contradictions in their relationships, in their choices, in their own identity. And here is the most disturbing thought. What would happen if Dexter did not have a code? Seralia in the chaos, killing indiscriminately? Or is the code the only thing that keeps him tied to his humanity? These questions not only define Dexter, but they challenge us to think about our own values. What keeps us punished? Is love, fear, social norms, or something deeper? The Dexter Code, transmitted by Harry, is its moral anchor. It gives it a purpose, but also imposes limits. However, even with the code, Dexter occasionally slides. Kill for anger, for revenge, activities that contradict the principles it says. These moments force us to face a chilling reality. The rules alone are not enough to make someone moral. What matters is the intention behind the rules. Now imagine Dexter without the code. Would it be different from the murderers that case? Or the code simply gives you an illusion of justice, a way to rationalize your actions? This is where Dexter's duality becomes more uncomfortable because it reflects our struggles with morality. How much of our behavior is molded by genuine values and how much is prevented for fear of consequences? Dexter's brilliance as a character is that it bothers us. Not only does it entertain us, but it causes us. Seeing it forces us to ask difficult questions about justice, morality, and control. What does it mean to be good? Can a person who commits evil acts remain good in his nucleus? And perhaps the most scary question of all, if you were in their shoes, could you resist the pull of your own dark passenger? Imagine having the power of Dexter, the ability to demand justice as best may seem. How would you use it? And most importantly, how would I change you? Dexter's story is not just about his trip, it is our. It challenges us to think about the lines we draw, the rules that we follow, and the parts of ourselves that we suppress. Consider the discomfort we feel when Dexter kills someone who does not fit perfectly into the bad mold. These moments reveal the fragility of its code and the dangers of moral absolutism. They force us to face the idea that justice is never as simple as we would like it to be. And isn't that the true reason why Dexter resonates with us? It forces us to recognize the gray areas in our own Morales Marcos. Ultimately, Dexter is not just a story about a man who fights with his darkness. It is a story about all of us. On the parts of ourselves, we suppress the questions we are too afraid to ask, and the lines that we are not sure that we cross until we do it. Think about the way Dexter shares his life, maintaining his hidden darkness behind a normality mask. How different is that in the way we introduce ourselves to the world, hiding our defects and insecurities behind carefully selected people? Dexter's struggle is a high version of a universal human experience, the battle between who we are and who we want to be. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we can't stop looking. Dexter's journey is messy, disturbing, and deeply human. It forces us to face our own duality, our own capacity for both good and evil. And in doing so, it offers a kind of catharsis, a way to explore the dark inside us without leaving the safety of the screen. Dexter not only holds a mirror, it invites us to investigate it. The question is, do we like what we see? Dexter's story forces us to face an awkward truth. Morality is not white and black. His charm not only distracts us from his darkness, makes us question ours. How much dark would you tolerate if it came wrapped in charisma, love, or justice? And here's the real question. Would you love Dexter Morgan if he was real? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next.